Welcome back to Ronnie's Receptive Reviews. Today I'm talking about something that I've been diving into for a few weeks now. I don't know if you've heard of the box office smash hit that just came out, Chainsaw Man the Reze arc, or at least it just came out when I wrote this. But I watched it right after binging the whole first season, and it was quite an experience. I'm gonna kind of speedrun past the show because I have a lot more to say about the movie. It's a fun show, but it just wasn't something that I felt massively connected to. As I'll get into later, the movie has much more defined character arcs. The show is very entertaining and is chock full of well-executed, awesome ideas, set pieces, and comedy. But I wasn't hit too hard by the overarching story, and by the end I was left with more questions than I was with satisfying conclusions. It also didn't change and progress as much as I would have wanted, and some episodes kind of blend together. I also wasn't expecting the first 4 episodes to be so plot-oriented towards boobs. Like, nearly the first half of the season is entirely a boob arc. It's pretty funny. It wasn't entirely just gags. I picked up on a lot of the themes of war and manipulation and that sort of interesting stuff. It's sort of built into the story. So the show definitely gave me enough substance to generally have a great time with it, but it just didn't hit nearly as hard as the movie, and I want to kind of immediately get into that. I'm giving season 1 of Chainsaw Man a 7 out of 10.
デンジ君は人間だけど、悪魔になることができるんだ。
Now I'm going to talk about the Reze arc, and just as a warning, I will be spoiling everything and talking about the movie assuming you have the knowledge of everything that happens in season 1. So go watch it if you haven't. Chainsaw Man the movie, Reze arc, picks right back up from the ending of season 1. Denji is still desperate for Makima. Makima is still mysterious and probably evil. Aki is still cool as ever, Himeno is still dead, and this time, there's a new girl in town named Reze, who forms a bond with Denji. They go on a few dates before she reveals that she's the bomb devil in disguise, and was sent here to take him down and steal his heart. Past this point, they basically battle for half the movie, until eventually Denji gains the upper hand by drowning her and washing up on a beach. And they live happily ever after. That's my professional plot summary. On to the review. I'm going to start on kind of a random note, but I think it's a good note to set up the review. Early on in the movie, there's a sequence where Denji goes on a theater-hopping date with Makima. They watch several movies that all leave no emotional impact on either of them whatsoever, until the very last one, which is a recreation of a Soviet movie called Ballad of a Soldier, which does come into play later. But as far as the scene goes for the story, in my opinion, this is really where the movie starts. There's more setup in earlier scenes, but this is really when we're told to buckle in. They both start to tear up at a scene that Denji remarks isn't even an important one. And I think this is basically the writers telling us to give that level of attention to every scene, even the supposedly not important ones. It's basically the creators telling us that they know they have gold on their hands, and that you need to lock in. This scene could also be read in many other ways and relate to multiple things at once, like how desensitized to emotion these characters tend to be, but I'm really bringing it up to set the tone for how vigilant I tried to be while watching this, and how insanely detail-oriented each small moment of this film is. I found myself getting tricked by what the movie already told me not to get tricked by when watching action scenes. I left understanding a lot about what I got from the story, but I also initially felt that the movie had some great character work scenes that were very smart, just in between the long epic fight sequences. But on a second watch, I noticed that those character moments were baked even into each fight scene. It's just so cohesive and smart all across the board. Anyway, that's my little preamble. The first aspect that I really want to dive into is the visuals. This movie looks insane, and got me so giddy and just injected dopamine to my brain with each passing frame. It's very on par with the excitement I felt watching Across the Spider-Verse or Mutant Mayhem, and those are both movies that I watched twice in theaters like I did with Chainsaw Man. A big contributing reason for that being to fully soak up each frame of beautiful animation. Yes, I did indeed go to this movie twice, don't judge me for how much money I've been spending on movies lately, and yes, this is the second episode in a row that I brought up Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. Go watch that.
That's it? One little horse. I don't need that horse.
Anyways, the biggest visual memory that you'll probably leave this movie with are the big fight scenes, because they do indeed rock. It's very intoxicating to watch. Each movement is a feat of animation. There's moments where we enter a sort of heat vision to emphasize Reise's explosive powers. There's moments where Reise's bomb becomes multicolored, which mirrors the fireworks in the background of an earlier kiss scene. There's full splash pages in movie form, where the moment of action is rendered to an insane level of detail, fit with expressive painterly backgrounds. There's moments where the line weight shifts to be heavier during the bloodiest actions. There's some incredible squash and stretch moments to emphasize Reise's strength. And mind you, this is all while a man with a chainsaw for a head uses the cords from his chainsaw arms to ride a shark devil through a massive tornado created by a tundra devil to fight a bomb devil. It's very epic. And side note, Reise's character design is one of my new favorite character designs in any media. And I know this wasn't created for the movie, but the way this design was brought to life, for example with her transforming into her devil form, is something that you could only really do with this high quality of animation and talent. There's also a lot of thought put into the visuals of less flashy scenes. There's a ton of blink and you'll miss it visual moments to marvel at in the opening theme song for the movie alone, and it was a great way to reintroduce these characters in a lively way. The scene before this, the very opening, is done in a fully black and white manga style as well. Continuing to list my favorite moments of animation, there's a scene in a dingy bathroom where we introduce the fake-out villain, who we'll call Mohawk Guy, and is lit with these very intense greens to heighten the very gross and disturbing things he talks about. There's also a scene where we see the aftermath of Aki and Angel slaying a devil, and the whole scene is lit by a bright red sky. The whole movie employs some incredible coloring and lighting techniques. The scene at the end where Makima kills Reise also had some great cinematic lighting, especially when we pan up to Angel. There's a few small moments where we see Denji's conflicting feelings in visual form. Once when Denji first gets feelings for Reise and we see a highly stylized version of his love interest swipe past the screen. And once while he's alone in the school and we see several characters in a dream sequence posing in lingerie. The water scenes in this movie are also some of the best, and that's for more reasons I'll dive into later. I think water is a big theme in this movie, but another reason why those scenes are so memorable is how well the water is animated, especially when Denji first jumps into the pool. Really every corner of the movie is stuffed with eye candy and visual majesty, and it's so hard to fully put it into words, so you really just need to experience it firsthand. There's also a lot about the visuals that I can't talk about without getting further into the themes and stuff, but I'll talk about that after I hard pivot and talk about the sound design. It's impossible that I didn't miss some important visuals that maybe you noticed, but the point is that laying out the laundry list of details just emphasizes how much thought was put into the film and sets me up to apply that much attention to each aspect of the movie and try to get the whole picture, even for scenes that supposedly aren't as important. But with that, let's continue. This movie also sounds great. The score blew me away. Back to the theater scene, the music made for the movie they watch really sets up for how interesting the piano compositions will be. The way the piano is filtered and manipulated makes the audio sound a bit muffled and watery, and gives it so much more emotional weight. The piano is really the star of this movie's score to me. The way it's recorded is just so textured and beautiful sounding. There's these light scratchy noises during most piano compositions, and I think what we're hearing is the keys of the piano lifting back up. And it's crazy that that's part of the music and sound instead of just a byproduct of the piano's design. Going back and listening to Kensuke's score made me realize how much of the gutturally uneasy and skin-crawling tone of that Mohawk Guy scene was created by the soundtrack. Really every scene is heightened by the sound design and music, and I think the best musical moment in the whole movie is probably, again, the pool scene. The sound design of Denji hitting the water combined with the initial piano notes sets up for one of the most surprisingly emotional moments of the whole movie. That initial clap of the water is just so perfect. Hello, this is Editing Ronnie. I just realized there's no clap noise when Denji hits the water. The scene was just so impactful that my mind assumed there was an impactful clap noise, but there was not. There's actually a few important claps, one being Denji hitting the pool, and the other being when Aki catches Angel and saves him from the Typhoon Devil's tornado, which is one of my favorite moments in the whole movie, and it's definitely emphasized by the sound design. Another highlight, the shock that Denji feels when Reze betrays Denji, is very much heightened by the music. The shift from the beautiful piano to a distorted and intense musical smash is really well done. And more than that, something I forgot about, if you go back to the soundtrack and listen to Sweet Danger, you'll hear how the familiar warm piano is in the background of the distorted insanity, and how the two styles interact and live with each other. And stuff like that is all over the soundtrack. The second half of that sequence is scored by heart-bumping techno beats, which sets up for what dominates the ensuing long string of action sequences. Another big highlight in the score from this stretch is the moment in the soundtrack where Reze is holding up two decapitated heads in front of our lead devil hunters, sitting in Aki's car, and the score shifts to a highly tense moment of lingering static before transitioning into an absolutely stellar retro beat with heavy bass as Aki shifts the car into high gear and speeds off into a chase scene. Past this point, the music is non-stop techno bangers that have too many memorable moments to count, but they each shift and change pace and tone to fit the emotion and varying levels of tension and action throughout the long battle. Some highlights are how the Typhoon Devil's theme mixes these insane techno beats with elegant choirs and intense strings. The electric guitar when Denji actually defeats the Typhoon Devil was so climactic and energetic, before shifting to these more doomful orchestral compositions as Denji faces off solely against Reze, and it really reinvigorates the audience's excitement. Aside from the main motifs of the score, the warm piano, the techno beats, the grand orchestral pieces, there's also some Russian folk-inspired compositions for Reze's character, as she's eventually revealed to be a Russian orphan used as an experimental weapon of war, and the fairy tale story sound to the music that plays during this explanation really sells the tragedy of it all. I really don't have any negatives about the music, and I wouldn't be surprised to hear people saying it was their favorite facet of the movie. I've personally been re-listening to the music a ton, and can't emphasize how much the score and sound elevated the story. I also want to quickly mention the voice acting before moving on. The voice acting in the movie is really incredible. I usually have quite a hard time talking about what makes a vocal performance good or bad, or just acting in general. It's not something I usually focus on, but the voice acting throughout the movie and the whole show has consistently piqued my ear. The whole main cast is perfect, Denji really carries a ton of emotional weight for the story with the performance, and I really tend to enjoy the goofier acting for the devil characters like the Future Devil or the Typhoon Devil, as well as the Bat Devil and Leech Devil couple. But I think my favorite in terms of cast was Reina Ueda, who plays Reze. Her character has probably the most complex emotional journey in the movie, and she sells it very well. So bravo to the whole cast. Before getting into those aforementioned complex emotions, I want to first mention that this movie is also simply funny as hell. There were several moments that made me laugh out loud. Beam the Shark Devil is the comedic relief of the movie, and I think he serves that role perfectly. His role in the story clearly says a lot about how important Denji is in this Chainsaw Man universe, but needless to say, his infatuation with Denji is consistently hilarious, calling him Lord Chainsaw and jumping for joy, even after being punched in the face by him. The moment where Beam is trying to get Denji to use the cords of his chainsaws to swing off buildings before Denji abruptly uses them to ride Beam like a horse was also just perfect. That moment was also aided by the music. There's a really great moment where Beam falls out of a building during the Typhoon Devil fight, and the bounce sound effects they added for it were so goofy and really got to my funny bone. The Plague Doctor character gets one scene to shine and ends it by quickly resigning the fight to Reze after realizing how powerful she is, and it's done very comedically. Denji is also a very funny protagonist. His naivety and childish nervousness around women makes for some perfect comedic setups. There's a few moments where Denji's internal monologue implies that he can't control his horny urges, like when he says that his body is moving independently as he walks into the cafe that Reze works at, or when there's a hard cut to Denji fully unclothed during the pool scene. Power isn't really in this movie very much, but her few scenes were really fun. The movie basically opens with Power putting all her might into punching Denji in the stomach. She also gets a moment at the end where she gets mad at Denji for eating flowers, another habit that Denji showed off in an earlier comedic scene. And despite the emotional ending to the whole theater hopping scene, the build up to that with the quick cuts and commentary from Denji was very funny. It's just a entertaining and compelling movie on every level, and I'm just kinda trying to cover all my bases, each aspect of the film, and do it justice. But with that, I think it's time to really dig into the story and what I made of it. I'm gonna start by laying out my general thoughts on the themes of this movie. It seems to me like a general theme of the entire Chainsaw Man universe is war and weapons.
Weapons, rated R.
Jokes aside, I found a lot in common with weapons in this movie. Both properties are sort of about the usage or weaponization of people. Characters in this cast are made to be weapons and adopt the weaponization mindset, encouraged to use their peers as tools. There's key differences, of course. Weapons is dealing more with small town, small scale personal struggles, while Chainsaw Man is much bigger and more about war in general. Weapons is just more focused on individual actions and personalities, while I see Chainsaw Man as a story to be more about these characters and how they're affected by their environments. To me, each character represents a different reaction to being used as a weapon, and that leads me to my first big point. I think all the main themes of the story are represented in the relationship between Denji and Reze, and the relationship between Aki and Angel. Both pairs share very similar backgrounds and personalities with key differences. Denji and Reze seem to have both been sort of stunted in their development. Both have never been to school, both largely had their childhoods ripped away from them by forces of war, and both still haven't really figured themselves out. On the other side, Aki and Angel, instead of being in denial about their environment and feeling sort of aimless, they both seem more cold and desensitized by being forced to get used to this life. I'm now gonna lay out my cards for the first time and tell you that I think this movie's most important theme, the one that drew me in the most, was hope. Both duos have one character who thinks they know everything there is to their life and aren't happy with it, but they don't think they have any other path to go down, and one opposing character who acts as the sort of beacon of hope to inspire change in the other. I'm going to focus on the Aki-Angel duo before jumping into Denji and Reze, who make up most of the thematic meat. Aki and Angel sort of mirror Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman in Shawshank Redemption. Angel thinks that there's no use in trying to adopt a life of hope and humanity, and basically has been successfully conditioned to think he's nothing more than a weapon, and he kind of just wants to die now. He's lost all hope. It seems to me like Angel wears a mask of stoicness and uncaringness to cope with the job he's tasked with. In the scene where him and Aki are cleaning up the aftermath of a devil hunt, they find a human begging for his death in the guts of the devil, and Angel refuses to kill him peacefully, saying he has no empathy for humans. And while Aki says he doesn't think they'll ever be friends, ultimately he makes a big sacrifice to save Angel from death, despite Angel saying he's ready for it. And this act of kindness and empathy clearly emotionally affects Angel, and inspires at least some hope and appreciation of humanity in him. It's a really beautiful scene, honestly. Onto the star of the show, the relationship between Denji and Reze. This relationship is the most important part of the movie and is represented by several metaphors that I'll go through as I talk about it. As opposed to the sort of one-sided teaching/inspiration moment between Aki and Angel, Denji and Reze actually learn a lot from each other. The basic outline of the arc is that Reze is here to steal Denji's heart and does this through emotional manipulation and getting close to him. But as they interact more, it's clear that Reze is forming genuine feelings for Denji, and feels a sense of connection and relatability towards him. But as soon as Denji starts to pull back, she immediately reminds herself of what her mission is, and bites his tongue off. She later tells Denji that everything between them was an act, but on a second watch it's clear that she's lying, and is simply pushing her emotions down, and convincing herself, like Angel, that her only purpose is to be used as a weapon, and that the path of hope isn't made for her. Getting started with the first visual motif, I felt like water was a massive piece of this movie's puzzle. It was probably chosen as an opposition to Reze's explosive fiery powers and as a subversion of war. There's two key scenes involving water, and to me both represent a different lesson from each side of the duo. I feel as though water represented freedom, escape from war, and some sort of emotional cleansing. There's also other weather elements like the rain scene and the tundra imagery that seem to represent the feeling of being swept up in this relationship. But when talking about the motif of water, I'm really referring to the pool scene and the ocean scene. The pool scene, what Denji later calls Reze teaching Denji how to swim, to me represents Reze showing Denji a taste of freedom and pushes him towards becoming his own person and forming his own goals, which is clearly a skill that Reze has, but doesn't realize how much he's underutilizing. The scene where Denji ends the fight by drowning himself with her is Denji sort of throwing what she taught him back at her, trying to cleanse her and escape with her away from the ever-present world of war they live in. Now, both of these scenes lead to a sort of rejection. Denji still rejects Reze because he loves Makima, despite Reze trying to push him to be his own person, with Makima clearly acting as a force on the side of war and manipulation. And Reze still rejects Denji, despite him trying to show her hope, because it seems like while both characters are subconsciously internalizing what they're learning from each other, they're having a very hard time externalizing and accepting a world outside of what they're conditioned to think. Another motif is planes. There's two scenes where we see planes flying above Reze's head, which seem to represent the task at hand hanging over her and the looming of what she sees as necessary warfare. The first plane shows up during the school section and after she kills Mohawk Man, and where we're slowly learning her supposed nature as a weapon. It acts as a sort of reminder of what her task is. The next plane shows up at the beach scene, and it really represents the tragedy of the situation to me. Denji offers her a glimmer of hope, and then the plane flies overhead, and it's essentially her subconscious telling her and reinstilling into herself that she can never be more than a weapon, right before biting off Denji's tongue once again. Another big theme is mice. We learn through several characters that there's a common fable of the country mouse and the city mouse, where the city mouse gets better food but lives under higher risk, and the country mouse doesn't get the same pleasantries but lives in safety. It seems clear that the country mouse is the more noble option, and the option that our characters should strive to choose, and Reze says she would rather be the country mouse, and Denji would rather be the city mouse. And this shows Reze's true nature and desire to escape and live a peaceful life. But at the end of the movie, Makima reveals to us the false dichotomy of the fable. After Reze rejects Denji at the beach, and just before leaving to go back to Russia, supposedly, it seems she has a change of heart, and just before reaching the cafe where Denji is waiting, she's cornered and killed by Makima, helped tragically by Angel. Makima reveals that she also prefers the country mouse, not for the safety, but because she enjoys watching the country mice be killed by dogs. It represents the sad truth and inevitability of how ever-present war is. And despite the fact that we're shown how hope can break through war in a way, it's clear that Reze's attempt to choose a path of hope came just barely too late. Before starting to wrap everything up, I want to bring it back and mention a few smaller metaphors and motifs. During the fireworks scene, we see a kid drop a candy apple, and someone else stomps on it, and I feel it represents the bond that Denji and Reze have towards their childhood innocence being ripped away. There's a green escape sign above Denji's head in the background during the school section, which is cluing us in on the dangerous nature of Reze. Back to the pool scene, we keep cutting back to a spider web. At first we just see a spider on it, we then see a butterfly on it, and finally we cut back to see the butterfly eaten. And this can mean a lot about the story, but it's mainly showing Denji being swallowed by Reze's trap, and being caught in this dangerous relationship. The movie, again, is simply packed with details for you to discover, and I might be going overkill with how much I'm explaining each detail, but I really wanted to follow each pathway to do this movie and my feelings on this movie justice. And the last big metaphor is flowers. There's a lot of flower imagery in this movie. I think flowers represents Denji and Denji's emotions in some sort of way. Early on, Denji eats a flower he was gifted, and this sets up Denji's emotional repression and fear of vulnerability. Soon after, he spits out the flower as a magic trick, and gives it to Reze, and then we see the flower flourishing in a glass of water during his second stay at the cafe, as a sign that he's starting to open up and learn from Reze. Skipping all the way to the end, we see 3 more flowers. One is a red flower that Reze picks up, which reminds her of Denji, and this is where she begins her tragically late change of heart. We also see some flowers when we meet back up with Denji during the end credit scene. We see the flower that Denji ate in the same cup but now wilted to represent the end of this chapter, and we see Denji holding a whole bouquet of flowers, who he thinks are for Reze, as he's clearly fully emotionally open in this moment and expecting to see Reze walk through the door at any moment, and instead Power walks through. And these flowers clearly represent the beginning of a new chapter, instead of what Denji thinks is a continuation of his time with Reze. I don't know what role Power plays in the next chapters of Chainsaw Man, but I think this is a good spot to remind myself that this story really isn't over. The movie has very smart and well-defined character arcs, but there are also clearly arcs that just aren't finished. At the end of the day, Reze died before she had a chance to change, and despite Aki inspiring Angel with hope, Angel still helps kill Reze, as he hasn't escaped the monotony and tragedy of war that he clearly still thinks of as necessary and inescapable. The sad truth is that nobody really won at the end of this movie, even if they were so close. And I think that's to sort of tell us that we don't have to go down that same tragic road. We can do better and escape the cycle through inspiring hope in others. This relates to why I think Denji is so fitting as a lead. My current theory for the reason why the Gun Devil is after Denji's heart is because not only does Denji clearly have a very powerful heart, literally and emotionally, but it's also a very manipulatable heart. Denji is very easily susceptible to manipulation, and we see how easy it could be to lead Denji down a path of the destruction. And that's why support matters, that's why hope matters, that's why knowing how to avoid propaganda matters. And that's why the writers are basically urging us to avoid manipulation and weaponization, and to keep those human emotions and value for hope close with us. That's pretty much my review. I still don't feel like I mentioned every detail that I could have, but I think I communicated the stuff that's important to my review, and important to why I'm giving this movie a 9 out of 10. I'm sorry that this isn't quite a 10 for me. I love this a lot, but it still does feel like just one piece of a larger story. And maybe the most important piece, and maybe a piece that was shaped with the utmost detail and creativity, but still a story that has more to say. I could see this movie growing to become a 10, but for now, I still absolutely adore this movie. And as it is, I think you should definitely go watch it if you haven't. Although I really hope you have if you made it this far. I don't want to spoil anything for you. It's a really great piece of media. So great, in fact, that I had to seek out even more. So I managed to get some more interviews for this episode with two of my friends, and you'll be hearing those now. This is Ronnie on the scene at Kelvin High School. I'm here with Arlo. Arlo, say hi.
Hi, I'm Arlo.
This is Ronnie on the scene at my house with Aviv to talk about Chainsaw Man. Say hi, Aviv.
Hey guys.
So, just to start off, how did you get into Chainsaw Man, and what kept you watching?
Okay, well, I have this lovely friend named Arlo. Shout out to Arlo.
Hi.
She put me onto this peak called Chainsaw Man, and what made me stay was probably like the directing choices that were made. I think season 1 was like so good. What they did was they made it more like storytelling. A lot of the scenes were like so cinematic, and I think it added to like the world and the story than just having it, you know, plainly animated. Each episode fit like a chapter, you know. I think they just like composed it very well. And then when I heard that the movie was coming out, and that Mappa was making it, I knew that they would cook.
I think I was introduced to Chainsaw Man on the internet somewhere. I started reading the manga back during the pandemic, and I think it was a good time for me to start reading it because I had so much time on my hands. And I think what was really appealing about it and what kept me reading and eventually consuming the anime when it came out was that I really liked how it doesn't hold back with how grim and dark it is, despite all of the comedy and what happens in the story. Because I think when you're talking about war and conflicts that are on such a massive scale, you can't hold back on all of the death and the gore and just the loss of it all. So I really liked that because it felt realistic to how war really is in real life.
Who's your favorite character, or what character do you relate to the most?
My favorite character is probably Aki and Denji. Those are like my two favorite. I think Aki has like so much depth, but it's like also unknown, you know, like there's so much to him that's like barely being shown, that like added to his story, and you have no idea what happened. And I think there's like so much more to learn about him. Throughout like the trio of Power, Denji, and Aki, I think he's like the least known, and he's also like cool as well because he wields a sword and he can like fight devils like he's, I don't know, the strongest in the verse.
My favorite character is Denji, the protagonist, and I think it's because he sort of subverts the tropes of a regular anime protagonist that always like thirsts over girls and whatever. I feel like that's really common, but because of his traumatic childhood and the experiences that he went through because of all of that racked up debt from his father and just the situation with the devils and living in a kill or be killed kind of world, I think it's really nice seeing that he can be an accurate representation of how hypersexuality is a realistic outcome of someone who's been through experiences like that.
Do you have a favorite scene or moment that was most memorable to you?
I'd say the pool scene. I had watched like multiple videos after the movie that explained so many references that were during that scene. Do you remember not the butterfly, the moth and the spider?
I thought it was a butterfly.
Whatever it was, is I was seeing online that people were saying that butterfly or moth or whatever it was actually poisonous. And so when that spider, who was supposed to be Reze, right, was trapping the butterfly, it was actually showing that she was also falling for him at the same time because the spider would die eating that butterfly.
I did not know that. That makes a lot of sense.
Right? Like, even though Reze had the goal to get the heart and to kill Denji, she actually kind of fell for him. And then that correlates to the scene near the end of their fight, right? When Denji pulls Reze into him with his chains, and then they fall into the sea together, and then they just play the same music. That music is just so good.
I think the most memorable moment for me was when the action really got started with, spoiler alert, all the stuff post-reveal of Reze being the bomb devil, the choreography and just the artistry of all of the one-on-one altercations between her and Denji were so beautifully done. Like, I swear I got goosebumps multiple times during those fight sequences.
Getting into specifics of the movie, I found the Reze arc to be insanely detail-oriented. Are there any details that caught your eye, or like little visual motifs that you think might be more important to the story than they seem?
I think that there were a lot of like indications throughout season 1 and the movie that were hinting towards like Makima, right? Because she becomes way more important in the end of the movie, but she's only present in the beginning, right? And I think that the details that were added to like Denji's thoughts when he's always thinking about Makima, how they had like a whole scene which was for the beginning of the movie before everything got into Reze, those details that were like foreshadowing towards her were very like specific. And I think that it was not just for following the manga, right, and being accurate. I think that they did that on purpose. All the expressions and those hints were just, they led together so well, but you don't notice it when you're watching it the first time.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of parallels to be drawn in sections in sort of the first part or the first act of the movie and in the final act of the movie that I really liked. There's a few of them that I noticed. One of them was when Reze first walks to the cafe to go to her job and everything after she met Denji in the phone booth. And then when Reze is walking to the cafe at the end of the movie to hopefully, but unfortunately not, end up meeting Denji in the cafe again after he told her that he would still like run away with her. The difference that I noticed there was that almost all of it is exactly the same up until around when she reaches the alleyway. First time when she's just walking casually with a pretty nice like air of confidence about her, but in the end of the movie, she picks up her pace into a run and like really wants to get there. And I think it really hit me hard because you can see the difference in how much she cares from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. I think it relates to her relationship with Denji because even though she's going to see him both times, the last time, she's so much more desperate to go and see him again.
What did you think about the mouse fable? Because that's one recurring theme in the movie that I didn't really understand for a while.
It's kind of hard for me to explain how I feel about it because I've read past the movie, like I've read the manga, continuing after the movie because I enjoyed the movie so much, but there's definitely a very key reason behind the mouse, the country mouse or the city mouse coming up, but I don't want to speak my opinion on it too much because it actually means more later. I totally, like, for the most part, I didn't really understand, but I think she was just trying to imply, like Reze was trying to imply that if Denji wanted to live that life away from everything, then they could do so, right? This is after Reze kind of fell for him a bit. And later, when Reze finds out that Denji works under Makima, then she kind of realizes, like, oh, you, even if we ran away together, you couldn't escape anyways. And then after, near the end of the movie, when Makima says, you should have been the city mouse or something like that, she was making a reference back to what they were talking about.
What she says at the end, and I think is revealing about like the fable, she says she also prefers this country mouse, but not because it like offers like a peaceful life, but because she likes watching the dogs uproot and kill the mice.
Yeah, because she was that dog or that wolf, you know?
She had that dog in her.
Exactly.
Yeah, so like with the country mouse and the city mouse stuff, that was really interesting, and I think it's important to look at it from like the angle of how the devils and the fiends answer that question versus how the humans in the story answer that question. Reze and Angel versus Denji and Makima and how they act differently about the question. And I think I really liked how the question was answered in relation to all of the sections of Angel Devil's story. He mentions that Makima forced him to be a city mouse when he wanted to be a country mouse. Like, he doesn't care about the riches or, you know, the glory of what he can accomplish in the city versus just living nicely out in the countryside. Whereas a character like Denji would rather live in the city, have nice food. He cares about small instant gratification because he never had that as a kid. Whereas Angel, because he doesn't really care about those things, he would have rather lived in safety and, you know, lived under his means with a maybe boring, more basic kind of life. As long as he can be safe, he doesn't have to work hard. Makima forces Angel to work with the special division and put his life on the line for executing devils when that's not what he wants to do. That's the same thing that happened to Denji, but it's kind of cool that you see two people in the same circumstance answer so differently. I really like that.
What would you rate the Chainsaw Man movie with a number from 1 to 10 or like an adjective or whatever?
Is the sky blue a question?
It's not a yes or no question.
So that's actually, it's actually not a yes or no question, but basically the answer is obvious. That's what I'm trying to say. It's obviously 10 out of 10.
Right.
It is just, that movie was so flippin' good. I think the 3 years were worth it. Action scenes, top notch, like best I've ever seen. Obviously don't want to make a debate between the Demon Slayer movie and Chainsaw Man because everyone was hating on one or the other, but I think they're both great, but Chainsaw Man did it different. The feelings that you get from the movie are so hard to describe, and this interview, no matter how much you understand it or don't understand it, just go, like watch season 1 and then watch the movie. It's you'll understand how speechless we are and how hard it is to answer questions regarding the movie because there's so many like tropes and so many details that you can only really like understand until we've had the movie like on streaming platforms so we can like analyze it, right? Seeing it in the theater, it's like it goes by so fast.
Okay, my rating for the movie, after having watched it 2 times, I think I'd give it a 9 or a 9.5. It was really, really good. And I haven't seen an anime movie or just an animated film as good as this one in a while. It was totally mind-blowing. And I say this as someone who's read this section of the manga over and over. Like, I wasn't going into this movie thinking I was going to see something new, but I felt like I was seeing something new. That's how well it was done. So I think this is a movie that I could rewatch over and over, more than I have, and I would recommend it to anyone.
Yeah, I agree. I also gave it a 9. And then the last question, what power would you have if you were a devil?
Oh my god, I mean, that's crazy to think about. It would be kind of interesting to see like medical horror style devils be addressed, like the fear of needles or the fear of other things like that. So maybe I'd pick something like that.
A needle devil?
Yeah, wouldn't that be crazy?
I would say I'd probably be the Sigma Devil. And because like everyone fears me so much, I'd be super strong. I'd probably solo the whole universe.
As you just heard, this whole Chainsaw Man universe means so much to so many people, and clearly this movie has really done this universe justice. I haven't read any of the manga, and I don't know any spoilers, so I can't really talk about how this arc relates to the future of the story, but watching the Reze arc in theaters has really made me excited to read the series whenever I can get my hands on the manga. Basically, this movie rocks, and I hope I communicated how much it rocks in this episode. I feel like my writing was a bit more scattered than usual, and I don't know if I fully expressed myself, but I definitely tried my hardest. And it really is a testament to how dense this piece of art is that it's just so damn hard to capture. But like I said, I did my best, and that's the best we can do. Check out Review Ronny on Instagram and YouTube for more info and archives on the show. And before I let you listeners go, it's time for Ronny's Joke of the Week. What would you say if you were opening your Christmas gifts hoping for a PS5, but instead you were given a connected series of metal links? Chains? Aw, man! See you next time on Ronny's Rinsed Reviews.
Hey, Ronny. Ronny?
Good reviews?
Fabulous reviews.
This is Ronny. Make it good.
Just suppose Ronny could have been a
reviewer.
It's Ronny, all right.
Ronny?
Reviews.
Fabulous reviews.
And this is the best review we got.